There are a lot of things in life that we debate and we discuss and we're dishonest about as a society. What might be best for us as individuals or as a group. There are many sectors of society which are based around dishonesty to an extent. Marketing, trying to sell people on your ideas or your products. Generally, hyping things up to seem better than they are. And that's what's to be expected out of society. That's just something that humans have always done. It's the bigger fish story, right? I caught a fish this big. You're always going to kind of overstate it and generally bullshit. Even if the idea is true, sometimes your representation of the idea might be a little lofty, let's say. But there's one area of human life that I believe we're selling ourselves short on, and that's intellectualism. In the sense that this is just one area where we really shouldn't bullshit ourselves, where we should be straightforward and honest about how we feel. And even two opposing philosophers with completely different ideas may be able to sit in the same room and debate their ideas and walk out with newfound ideas. The whole idea behind an argument or a debate is not to win. One person to win, anyhow. It's for both parties to win. The original Aristotelian argument was where people would gather and share their ideas and debate in order to walk away with newfound ideas about what you think to be true. Even if your ideas haven't changed, you walk away at least with a new understanding of how other people feel. And even if you may be in the right and they're wrong, if enough people believe a certain thing that's wrong, that makes it right. That's hard to kind of explain, but if people live a certain lifestyle and one person's trying to tell them to change that, for example, by saying, you should live this way, you can see this. Well, I could give you a lot of examples, but I feel like I'll get way off the topic here. Sometimes things work for people because they work for people. And life is very complicated and complex. And the idea, at least in my mind, was that once we reached a certain state of, access to knowledge, such as we do now, an educated, informed society, relatively to the past, at least most people can read, and we had access to more information than we'd ever had in the past. That backfired. And we watched this unfold over the past couple decades where there seems to be a gradual dumbing down of society. And you can see it in not just test scores or IQ tests. These things don't really measure properly how a society is supposed to improve. In other words, you would think with the vast increase in knowledge and information we have, there would be a vast increase in awareness and knowledge of people. But we found that most people don't want to take in what's true. They want to take in what feels good. And this leads me back to, I guess, the people in our society, the intellectual dishonesty from some of the people that we consider to be the thinkers in our society. Now, give you an example. People look up to folks like Jordan Peterson or even Ben Shapiro. Both of these guys have some great ideas about life. They have some understandings about the ridiculousness of certain thought processes and how we've fooled ourselves. However, it's so intertwined with garbage, semantics, and half-truths that it's very difficult to get any real assessment out of it, any real understanding of the breadth and the width of the world and how it actually operates. Now, I just gave those as people would consider right-wing commentators. There are plenty on the left as well. I don't watch either. I don't want to hear somebody's political views as a version of faux philosophy, if you will. Often people will refer back to philosophers of the past and the great thinkers who did have political views, and everyone has a bias and a political view. That shouldn't be the problem. The issue isn't what your views are, but rather how important you think they are and with how you carry yourself. I want to make this very clear right now. I don't consider myself an intellectual at all. I don't consider myself one of the, leading thinkers by any means. I'm just another dude. And therefore, I have to listen to some of these thinkers in order to gain some better understanding of the world. And what you expect is these are kind of people who dedicate themselves to thinking and to processing. What's changed, which is often, ignored or not noticed. As I was sitting here before I started this video, I was listening to my clocks tick and doing just thinking. And it reminded me of watching something the other day where they did an experiment with people who had to sit with their thoughts in a room alone for 6 to 15 minutes. And then they did the same experiment with a button in the room. If you could push that button, it would give you a mild electric shock. Now, mostly the men, overwhelmingly the men, 3/4 of them chose to push the button rather than sit with their own thoughts quietly for 5 minutes. I mean, this was just one example, of course. People get bored very easily with their thoughts and ideas. The reason I mentioned the ticking clock is when's the last time you sat with a ticking clock? Of course, most people don't have clocks anymore anyway. But something like that, sitting in silence and thinking about, why we think the way we think, how to process the things that we believe we know. And instead, it seems that we just carry our ideas on our sleeves as if they're fact and profess them to the world, which is to be expected when you're a proletariat, just the average worker. You don't know much. You're not very experienced at things. You know what you know. You have to argue from ignorance a lot of the time. And therefore, we have to refer to people that we considered experts on these topics. Now, when it comes to an expert on woodworking, I need to figure out how to use a tool I haven't used. I go to YouTube or I read a manual, and there's other people who have taken the time to put these things together for you. So when you want to look up how to build something, how to fix something, that's readily available. But when you reach for the manual of life or the best system to operate a society with, the shelves are empty. I mean, they're full. Don't get me wrong. The shelves are packed full, but they're packed full of bad ideas. Some which work for some people, some which work for others. And I think what's been lost is that ability for modern philosophers to sit quietly with their thoughts. They're constantly quoting on other people's shit. This is like when I brought up Jordan Peterson. I've listened to a lot of his lectures. He'll spend half his time complaining about Marxists, people who believe in Karl Marx. And then he'll go on to completely misrepresent and misquote Karl Marx. I'm not a Marxist, but I've read Karl Marx's statements about things which completely go against everything Peterson says. He didn't understand 1984 and Orwell. He completely mistranslates the texts and, the discussions and the meanings of the philosophers. However, you can't argue that because the average person doesn't know that. They're trusting him to know those things. But he's catering to a specific crowd. And as I mentioned, Shapiro is the same kind of thing. It's not pointing to how to improve a society. It's really look at what these other people are doing. Look at the left. Look at what they're doing. But people look up to these people as intelligent thought, I guess they would be the, leading thinkers or thought leaders, as we call them, for a lot of folks. Now, there are some good living philosophers out there, but they're generally drowned out, and even they have some bad ideas. Noam Chomsky is a well-known philosopher, and he is a leading thinker of our time, one of the last living legends in that realm. But some of his ideas are so stupid. I mean, I lost respect for him when he said a few things a couple of years ago during COVID about locking people away who don't get the vax, and unthought out things that are based on kind of hype and hysteria. But he was basing his beliefs and ideas on the same thing, what he hears from other people, because he also has to refer to experts. So a philosopher could be phenomenal at philosophy and thinking, but have no idea about the scientific merit of whether their philosophy or their idea could actually be done or should be done. They might consult with a scientist, whereas a scientist used to consult with philosophers. But then we have people like Neil deGrasse Tyson. He's considered a thought leader in science. And to me, I just cringe at the thought of a guy like that being taken seriously. He has become so immersed in his cultural, the science culture surrounding celebrity status that, he wears funky clothes and says ridiculous things just to get attention. You can tell by just seeing the guy that, because he used to have some good things to say in some of the old documentaries. He was an astrophysicist and he knew what he was talking about. But now he's an expert on everything. And this is where we get into a slippery slope of everybody who's a thinker or, an intellectual thinking they know everything about everything. And he was once, Neil deGrasse Tyson once said that philosophy is pointless. He said something like, any real scientist knows philosophy is useless and it has no purpose in our today's world. And people around the world cringed. People in his own field were like, are you kidding me? The philosophy is part of the science. But he's so detached from that, he never learned that or understood what it really meant. It's not his fault, but it is his fault. Because when you become a celebrity scientist, you spend most of your time talking about stuff and tweeting instead of actually learning and reading new things. And most of the philosophers of the past are misquoted by modern philosophers, and they cherry pick data. There's quite a hubris for people who often only specialize in one topic. I'm only 47. There was a time in my life where I thought I knew more than I did. When I was in my 20s and early 30s, I thought I was so smart, Then you start encountering people who know a hell of a lot more than you do, and you humble yourself. I still consider myself a smart person. I just have realized over my lifetime that, there are people with better ideas. And of course, I always knew that, but as far as being able to admit it, and that's what I feel a lot of these thought leaders will never admit, that other people have better ideas. You take a guy like Elon Musk, he has to be the arbiter of all ideas, He thinks he's the king of everything. He's made electric cars, he was successful at PayPal. He bought both of these companies or bought into them. He didn't create either one. He's never invented an electric car himself. He's never built a rocket himself. He's a figurehead, but he's considered the smart man. And he's kind of the idiot's genius in today's world. Not to insult anybody who looks up to the guy. Sure, he's made a lot of money for himself, but he's a child inside. And a lot of wealthy people are. Who am I to say? But they become quite Twitter philosophers, if you will, where they have all the best ideas and think everybody looks up to them. And in turn, it tends to be true. I think it's important that we read our own philosophy. We're in a day and age where people think that TED Talks is something that is going to improve us and improve our lives because there's some smart person up there on stage telling us about some mind-blowing idea that's going to change the future. But what you'll realize, and the common theme is through many of these great ideas, they're ideas that don't actually impact our life. They're ideas that don't actually improve the bigger picture. They're little band-aids for the larger problem, the contusion of, the way we're operating ourselves in society and allowing ourselves to, fall behind by not doing our own work. We blame society, we blame the government, we blame the schools. Ultimately, it comes down to personal responsibility at some point in your life. I learned a hell of a lot more outside of high school than I did in high school. There are some people who never made it through high school and never bothered to do any further education. This is often circumstantial, but often it's by choice as well. And that's why people look to others who have done the work. And when the people who are claiming to have done the work haven't done the work, we're all doomed. So what do we do about it? We like simple fixes. I think that's just kind of universal. We like easy answers. We like quick fixes to things. I think that if people don't read themselves, then they're going to believe what something says. You're going to let other people translate books for you. There used to be book clubs, people would get together and read a book and share what they learned. Now it's one guy read a book and he's going to tell us all about what it meant. It's people are lacking any personal accountability in doing their own philosophic research. Belief feels safer, but it isn't. And I guess that depends on the situation too, but some of these people have a lot of bad ideas and a few good ones. Some of them have a lot of great ideas and a few bad ones. It all depends on the individual, what they're trying to achieve. whether they're wanting to get internet fame or ad revenue or sponsorships or deals. But even if they firmly stand behind what they say and they're doing it for free, maybe they're just delusional. Maybe they think that what they believe is true and it's not. But ultimately, if somebody's quoting other people, you should be looking at those people too. And that's what we're failing to do, is look beyond the pale and to actually search into what people are saying instead of taking what they say at face value. Because it's very easy to point the finger at other people's ideas and say these are wrong. It's a lot harder to come up with your own ideas that actually work for the people. And ultimately, that's what we all want, is ideas that work for people. Got to navigate this crazy world. So, yeah, those are my thoughts for the day. Thanks for watching. Talk to y'all next time. Leave a comment. Hit the thumbs up. If you want to be a patron, visit me on Patreon at Carpo719. And I'll talk to you guys probably tomorrow.